I'd like to say a couple things here on this immigration issue and the deportation issue. And I'm just going to be really honest throughout, and I'm going to say things that might make people mad on one side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle, because the fact is that reality makes people mad who don't want to look at reality. And I don't think either side is really focused on reality. I don't think they can. I think that they are so far apart and so focused on attacking each other that nobody's saying what's actually happening, what's actually real, and focusing on it. That's what I'm going to do. So, first, I'm going to talk about an experience that I had in which I was ripped off by somebody, multiple people, who are quite presumably illegal immigrants. And I will share the whys in a minute. I don't know that for a fact, and I'm not going to stand on something as a fact that I don't know to be a fact. But here's what happened. I owned a trucking company for a few years, and I had an employee who picked up a vehicle in Washington State, delivered that vehicle to New York, New York, and when she got there, it was a scam, okay? When she got there to drop the vehicle off, this was supposed to be a payment that was going to be made by some online payment platform following drop off. The person who pulled off the scam hijacked a legitimate, as far as I know, legitimate carrier's profile on Central Dispatch, which is a dispatch website that you can use as a business owner to find loads for your business if you have a DOT number and an MC number and everything else that's required as a trucking company. And so they posed as or hijacked the profile of a legitimate carrier or someone who had all appearances of being a legitimate carrier, and they promised pay following drop off, which is not a non-standard method of payment. And we could talk about that industry and some things that are messed up with it, but the fact is it's not anything that's really out of the ordinary. There were a few red flags during the process. I'm not going to go into them because I want to keep this brief. The point is, my driver got to the drop off point. She dropped off the vehicle, and it became very obvious very quickly from that point forward, if we hadn't already had our suspicions before that point, that this was a scam. And the people on the ground and it was a group of Hispanic people. I'm going to address that in a minute because it is really tricky to talk about this without either being accused of being racist or actually being racist. And sometimes the distinction can be a little bit subtle there. And I think that it should be evaluated with all the subtlety that's actually there and not just assumed. But the fact is, and right now we're just dealing in the facts, the fact is that it was a group of Hispanic people who received that vehicle and then did everything that they could possibly do to disappear from the face of the earth. And interestingly, interestingly also, my driver's co-driver is also Hispanic. But she had the ability to memorize the phone number that she saw during the exchange that occurred on the ground there, because this was obviously something that was set up where the primary person behind it wasn't even physically present. He was also Hispanic. He had a Hispanic name. He was texting and calling in Spanish with the people who were actually physically there. And long story short, they never paid. They never intended to pay. They got a cross-country delivery of this vehicle for free, and they got away with it. And I called the police in New York, and I actually got a voicemail and no call back. And I have very, very little hope or expectation that this would ever be resolved. But there are context clues. This person had an account with Copart, which is a nationwide reseller of mechanical things, cars, trucks, equipment, etc. they have an account and they have a business name and they have a whole bunch of things that could be used to track them down if somebody cared to. If there is a legitimate purpose of ICE, I think it'd be to look into something like that that appears on the surface to be potentially um, theft that was pulled off, wage theft, right? Theft of our labor, our time, my equipment, their time and labor, to and that was committed by what was very likely to be illegal immigrants. Why do I say that? Because I don't believe, and this is the refutation. This is how I refute anybody who thinks that I'm being racist and making this assumption. This is not a racist assumption. It would be a little bit more prejudiced, I think, to say that, people who came legally into this country are going to do these kind of illegal things. I don't think that. I think that someone who's doing this kind of stuff probably came into the country with the same kind of attitude and methodology that they go about doing business now that they're in the country, right? It's just like things match. This matches that. If you are not doing business legally when you're in the country and you're of Latino origin or just south of the border origin, my assumption is that you most likely came across that border illegally because you don't care to do things the legal way. Now, people who came across the border illegally might still do things the legal way and might still be good, upstanding people within this country once they're here. Why? Because crossing the border for them was not a decision that was primarily about breaking the law or doing anything wrong. It may have been a decision about protecting their family, providing for their family. It may have been a decision that wasn't really informed by anything about the law or breaking the law or not breaking the law. It was just what they felt that they needed to do to give their family the best life possible. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us here in America can relate to that sentiment, especially parents. So I find it possible that someone comes across the border illegally, but then becomes an upstanding resident of the United States and a law-abiding resident of the United States once they're here. But I find it very unlikely that somebody who is breaking the law and purposely harming others after getting into the country went through a legal process to get here in the first place. They just don't have that attitude and mindset. So I find it more likely, I hope I'm making this super clear, I find it more likely that someone who broke the law by crossing into America now upholds the law than I find it likely that somebody who upheld the law while crossing into America is now breaking the law. That doesn't make any sense, right? Logically, the first example makes sense, but the second example does not make sense. So I find it frustrating and counterproductive for anybody to live in some sort of fairy tale world where there's not bad people, like really, really bad people. And we can talk about whether, bad people can be redeemed and forgiven and all that stuff. But while you're in the process of doing those kind of actions, you're a bad person, or however you want to put it, based on your worldview and how you see good and evil and whatever. But we can all kind of use that terminology, at least have an understanding of that terminology, and say, that's a bad thing to do. This is not a fairy tale world. There are bad people, and bad people do bad things, and people who want to break the law in the United States and see an opportunity to get into the United States illegally, probably going to take that opportunity. And there is crime, and it's kind of the same thing as like it's it works against the cause of good, hardworking, honest immigrants, which there are many. It works against their cause to have these kinds of people that I just described, that I experienced a harmful event with, it, to have them all in the same category, all kind of defended the same way, um, or even to have them existing in the country at all. Because every time something like this happens, I think I'm a pretty rational, even-keeled, understanding person. So when this happened to me, I did not start hating everybody who speaks Spanish or comes from south of the border or has dark skin. Like, I get that this action was representative of the small group of people who took that action and nobody else. And that doesn't mean they're the only 5 people in the United States who are going to take that kind of action. Obviously, there's more than just them, but each individual person should have the right to prove it one way or the other on their own merit, and not be thrown in with some other group of people that happens to look like them or sound like them, right? Each individual person should be judged on their own actions. And I understand that, I got ripped off by this Hispanic person, actually a whole group of Hispanic people. But I've also, in the course of doing business as in trucking, I've been ripped off by white people. I've been ripped off by anybody who kind of has the opportunity and the desire to rip others off. And it's kind of an industry where there's a lot of that. And it is absolutely not only or all or even primarily immigrants who are doing that. In fact, that's the only notable experience that I had with immigrants, or people who I suspect are immigrants, ripping me off. And I've had I could share multiple stories of being ripped off. That was the only one where the people who did it were Hispanic or anything other than, English speaking white people. So I can differentiate that. It would still be best to get them out of the country if that can legally be done, and that does matter. If that can be legally done, it would be best to get them out of the country, not just for me, not just for, other people who look and sound like me, but it'd be best to get them out of the country for the bad name that they play a part in giving other Hispanic people who are good, hardworking, honest people who probably deserve to be here and very likely went through the legal process to get here, and that legal process has changed. So the process that they used to enter the country may have been legal at the time that they entered, and now with a different administration, different ways of thinking, they want to make that process illegitimate. Now, here's the problem that I have. When we're thinking about that, like, the idea has been tossed out. First of all, I would be happy with an administration that used ICE or used whatever other legal means is available to remove people who can legally be removed from the country who commit crimes, whether it's that type of crime or another type of crime. There are worse crimes out there than stealing $2,500 from me. Violent crimes, theft, scams, and things like scams. I am all for targeting those people and getting them out of the country. The problem is that this administration has been in such a race to remove people from the country as quickly as possible that they're not targeting those people. And it's not really hard to explain why. Like, this isn't rocket science. When you offer bonuses, huge bonuses, like bonuses that are very, very tempting in an economic climate like the one we have now, and then you offer bonuses for each capture or arrest or deportation or whatever it is, you are not incentivizing going after the criminals, because the criminals are smart. The criminals are wary. The criminals are not doing the right things. The criminals are hiding. The criminals take more effort to catch. And you're going after getting as many people as possible so you can get those bonuses. That does not incentivize going after the worst. It incentivizes going after the best. They're the easiest ones to catch. They're the ones who are showing up to their court appointments. You can just wait outside the courtroom and grab them on their way out, right? And when I say court appointments, I don't mean they're going to court because they killed somebody or they stole from somebody or they got a traffic violation. I mean, they're going to court because they're going through the legal process to become a citizen, but they haven't become a citizen yet. But they're doing everything they can to go through the proper legal process to do that, which at the time that they entered the country may have included coming into the country before gaining citizenship and going through a process once here to gain that citizenship. They're going to their court appointments and they're getting grabbed on their way out of court because they're the easy targets. But they're not the right targets. They're not the targets that this administration told us they were going to go after. This administration is losing the trust of people who are paying attention and people who care and people who want the right things and people who actually want violent, scary people to be removed from this country. And you're going after the men, women, and children who are trying to do things the right way because they're the easy targets, and you've incentivized removing as many as possible by any means necessary. And guess what? Those people who ripped me off and those people who have done worse things are still in the country and will continue to be in the country because they are the ones who are hiding. They're the ones who are doing it well. They're the ones who are not present and visible within society. This makes no sense whatsoever. I am all for getting rid of the violent or even just criminal people that we can legally get rid of. And here's the other problem I have with it. There's a lot of talk about getting rid of violent people and like rapists and stuff like that. And we put those words on it to make it sound really scary, like these people are really bad. And guess what? Some of them are. But we have Ghislaine Maxwell, who is, by the way, an immigrant to the United States. She was born in France. And while we are talking about potentially revoking the citizenship, like revoking the citizenship of immigrants or former immigrants who have successfully become citizens of the United States and have all the rights of citizens, we're talking about revoking their citizenship if for whatever reason, I guess, if they happen to be brown and happen to be from below the southern border. But when it comes to Ghislaine Maxwell, one of the most notorious people who have done horrible things, and we know has done horrible things and has been convicted of doing horrible things to young girls. And we're not talking about revoking her citizenship. We're talking about a pardon. We're talking about cutting deals. We're talking about she's already, not hypothetically, but has already been moved to a lower security, cushier prison. You're having a really hard time making this look like it's not racist because she happens to be white. So I am all for getting rid of anybody we can legally get rid of who is a threat to this country, a threat to people, and a threat to me and my ability to work hard and earn money and not be ripped off in the process. But that's not what's happening right now. And you need to think about it. If you support it, you need to think about it. You need to put on your logical hat, right? Take a page from Charlie Kirk, take a page from anybody who can sit down with a thought process and follow it through and come to logical conclusions and question authority, even if you like that person who's in authority. Question authority no matter who it is in authority. And if it adds up and it makes sense and it's consistent, then you say, okay, you've earned my trust. I don't automatically trust you because you're an authority, but you earn my trust. And if it doesn't add up and it's inconsistent and it doesn't make sense, then trust yourself, not that person. Trust your thought process, not that person. I think I laid out some pretty clear arguments here as to why this is not effective and why it is not what it is supposed to be or is said to be. And I do not know why we are protecting the most notorious child abuser, who happens to be white, and yet we are going after women and children who are trying to get into this country the right way and do the right things and be productive, honest, hardworking members of our society. It does not make sense. And I'm not standing behind, somebody just because they're brown. I'm not standing behind someone just because they're white. I'm not standing against anybody just because they're either of those skin colors or any other. It needs to be consistent. And what's happening right now is not consistent. So I'm having a really hard time explaining why that is. But let's just fix it.